Morning, and thank you for the beautiful song, I'd Rather Have Jesus. Thank you for the beautiful children's story as well. I think both of them find some connection with the sermon, and we'll try to work it out. But just imagine that sense of focus that you get when you say this, I'd rather have Jesus. You know that moment when you fall in love with somebody, when you just see that person and you know that they are the right person in your life. I've just been reading a biography of a Seventh-day Adventist scholar. You know, there's a series of biographies that get published by the church, and the most recent one just came out. It's on a gentleman called Ted Heppenstall, or Edward Heppenstall. It's an amazing book and a story, but I'm at the point in his life story where he has just fallen in love with this young lady from Norway, I think it was, and he's like 30 years old, and you know, your eyes just fall on that person and you want to hold on to that person and say, this is mine. And this is the way that we all feel from time, or all the time in our Christian life. We want to have Jesus more than anything else in our world. But we have a problem because there is something else that attacks our attention. It takes away our allegiance. And so today we're going to look at the seduction of Babylon. I thought, should I give it a more challenging kind of title? That talks about sleeping with the enemy. In other words, in bed with the enemy, because that's what if you read the book of Revelation, it talks about Babylon being extremely seductive with the wine intoxication that she gives you, and that nations go and they fall in love with her instead of falling in love with God. And we're going to dive into that a little bit, but maybe just quickly a recap. You know, I've been talking about Revelation for a few weeks. The disadvantage is that we've been doing it since April, I think. And so maybe you can't remember where we were when we started in April. So I'll try to use just 3 or 4 sentences to look at each presentation that we have. The very first one, we were looking at the very first chapter of Revelation, where Jesus is walking between 7 lampstands, and there's a situation that's quite challenging. But the one message that comes from chapter 1, from that very first part of Revelation, is that we might be confronted with fear. Fear is an operative word. Fear is a powerful word in our lives. But what does Jesus say to the people, to the 7 churches? Do not be afraid. So the book of Revelation is not about being afraid. The end of the book of Revelation is about a victory. And there's something joyous about the book of Revelation. There's this ability to face one's hardships without being overcome by them. And we're going to see a little bit of that again today, I think. Then the second part was, we were looking at worship. And, you know, there was this whole thing about who is it that's worthy to open the scroll to read it. And we found one who was able to open the scroll. And we were actually surprised by the person that was chosen. The person that was chosen to open the scroll wasn't the most powerful. It wasn't the most, the one who speaks in such ways that nations quake. It was actually a lamb that was slain. And we discovered that there is something subversive about being a Christian. There's something subversive about worship that makes us stand apart from the rest of the world that we're in, and we're going to look at that again today. And then the next one that we looked at Revelation 12 and 13, and we discovered that the devil is trying in so many different ways to attack us and the world. And sometimes it's a constant battle that we are facing through. We discovered a counterfeit territory, a trinity, and we find that the devil works through coercion. He tries to force us, and we started understanding the way that the devil was working. And then the last time that I preached, I spoke about the three angels' message. What happens when heaven begins to preach? And that started giving us hope. What can we do as we battle against the devil? How can we live our lives? And do you remember I was sitting on the floor while I was talking? I said that sometimes we think that what is normal in our lives is the way that it is. But we forgot what the real normality is and what God really wants from us. So those were the main ideas. But today we're now going to move on a little bit, and we're going to look at Revelation 15, 16, 17, 18. And one thing that I've discovered is that it's actually really difficult to preach from Revelation. This is sermon number 6. I love the book of Revelation. There's so much that can be preached. And so I'm just looking at a big picture for where we can be. But so let's have a look at this plea that says, "Come out of her, my people." If you lived in the first century and you were a citizen of the Roman Empire, there is no greater spectacle that you could expect than a Roman triumph. I wonder if you have heard about what the Roman triumphs are. When a Roman general or an emperor conquered a new nation, they would return to this capital city and they'll throw a massive parade going down the main street, very similar to the one that we might have seen if we were on Union Street today, with armies walking down those streets. The crowds would line the streets, cheering the army as they paraded the loot that they had taken. They would show off carts overflowing with gold, silver, all the sacred items that they took out of the temples of the foreign nations. And they would display this exotic material and resources taken from the land. And tragically, they would parade the people that they had conquered as well. Soldiers, royal families, the best of the brightest, who were now destined to be enslaved by Rome. It was a parade of ultimate power, of wealth, of ultimate pride. Fascinating. So many people got used to seeing these parades as they came out. So much so that the New Testament actually talks about these parades quite a lot. But they talk about it in a way that we find quite surprising. One of the surprises is that the Apostle Paul uses these parades on at least 2 or 3 occasions in the place where he writes. I wonder if you can remember the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 2, verse 14 to 16. Because listen to this, what Paul says. He says, "But thanks be to God, who in Christ always leads us as Christians in a triumphal procession and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere." So you've got this picture. So on the one hand, you've got the Roman leaders taking the spoils of their armies. But what does Paul say? He says, we as Christians are the ones that are walking in a triumphal parade, and other people see us, and when they see us, they smell God's fragrance and they smell God's blessings that come through that. That's quite an interesting challenge. Maybe you will remember the book of Colossians, chapter 2, verse 14. Listen to what Paul says over there. He says, in Roman terms, that there's a big victory parade. He says, Christ leads us in a triumphal procession. And who are the captives that are marched through the streets? That comes over there. He actually talks about, in verse 2, verse 15, it says, having disarmed the power and authorities, he made a public spectacle over them, triumphing over them by the cross. So here you've got this victory parade, and you've got the powers and authorities of the Roman government, the powers and authorities of Satan, the cosmic powers and authorities. And Jesus says we are marching with them for wherever we might be able to be. By the way, here is one that you might not have noticed before, but it's a verse that you know very well. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. We always read that verse when we talk about funerals. And it talks about the shout of an archangel and a trumpet of God. Now, I wonder if you can picture this, that Jesus has been away up in heaven. Now Jesus is coming back. And before Jesus comes into the city to fetch us, we get this parade, this cosmic parade that takes place up in the heaven. And it says, the trumpet will sound and the dead will rise, and they will go up into the air, and they will actually, and if you study the Greek words of it, they will go and they'll meet Jesus in a triumphal parade, and they'll bring him to earth so that we who are alive can then meet with God, and he can take us to our home where we can be. So we've got all these parades that are taking place in the New Testament. So guess what? Revelation chapter 18 has a very similar kind of triumphal parade that's taking place over there. And this time, the problem is you've got a city, and the city is the biggest city in the history of the world, the city of Babylon. And it has been conquered. It has collapsed. It has fallen apart. And in Revelation 18, verse 2, verse says, Babylon the Great is fallen, and it has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, a cage for every unclean, hated bird. And I wonder if you can hear the contrast over here. There's no scene of triumph there. In fact, in verse 9, you can see, Revelation 18, verse 9, the kings of the earth who committed fornication and who lived luxuriously with her, what will they be doing now? They'll weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, there goes the great mighty city of Babylon, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And so Rome is no longer the conqueror. God is the one who's the conqueror. Rome is defeated. The parade of power has actually become a funeral dirge. The kings and the wealthy merchants on the earth aren't cheering on the sidelines. They are standing off, far away. They're weeping and they are mourning, watching the system that made them rich, and they're watching that system collapse in front of their eyes. Babylon doesn't just use fear to control people. Babylon uses seduction. And Babylon represents an economy, a political arrangement, and a society built on excessive luxury, conspicuous consumption, and the exploitation of others. So what we've got here is we've got Babylon. It has fallen, and the people who are crying, they are crying because they've lost everything that they've owned. It's like, we'd want this, and we want that, and we want that. In contrast, you've got the Christians who say, I'd rather have Jesus for where we can be. But so we've got this picture of Babylon that has fallen. And I forgot that I've actually got a picture over there of a Roman triumph, but we can go over that. That's a lot of details. But what I wanted us to look is, let's just go back a little bit now to Revelation 15. So Revelation 18 finishes with the fall of Babylon, with this funeral dirge that takes place rather than a triumph that's taking place. But let's just go and start at the beginning in Revelation chapter 15, because I want us, Revelation 15, 16 talks about the plagues, the 7 plagues that come. So we have to understand what leads up to chapter 18, okay? And there's a complicated picture, and it might begin to make sense as I talk. John sees 7 angels in Revelation 15 and 16, and each one of these angels carries 7 golden bowls, and they pour out the 7 last plagues over the earth. Now, when we read about plagues, I wonder if you can think back in the Bible, where have we encountered plagues before? There's a very famous story that we learned all the time when we were children, all the time back. You remember the book of Exodus, where it talks about water turning to blood? Can you remember Moses kept going to the Pharaoh and he says, I want you to let my people go. And the Pharaoh would say, not a chance. And then every time there would be another plague that would come for them. Darkness, frogs, hailstones. Our minds should immediately hear the echo of the Old Testament, where we have seen these plagues before. In Egypt, when the Israelites were enslaved by the empire of Egypt, and God sent plagues, and the reason for the plagues is to dismantle the gods of Egypt. He's attacking the gods of Egypt. He's pulling them apart. He's breaking their power so that he can secure the freedom of his people. So through the plagues, God was essentially standing in front of Pharaoh saying, let my people go. And in Revelation, God is doing exactly the same thing. But in the plagues here, he says, he is standing before the dragon and before the beasts and before the empire of Babylon, and he's demanding, let my people go. I want you, however, to notice a very interesting detail that is easily missed about how God does this when we look at the plagues. Revelation 15, verse 7. It says, these plagues are poured out from 7 golden bowls. Do you remember that? 7 golden bowls? Let me read it. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to them 7 angels, 7 golden bowls filled with the wrath of God, who lives forever and forever. We find these golden bowls somewhere else in the Old Testament. I wonder if you remember. In the Israelite sanctuary, in the temple, there are golden bowls. Okay? And those bowls are used for a very specific purpose. They were used to catch the blood of the lambs that were slain on the altar. So you remember when a sacrifice would take place, they would bring a lamb, they'll sacrifice it on an altar, and of course the blood would flow, but the altar had a very special kind of pipework so that the blood would then flow off the altar into these golden bowls. Okay, so now go back to think about Exodus, and I'm going to read to you Exodus 24, verse 8. Moses, listen to what Exodus 24, verse 8 says. It involves blood. It involves the covenant between God and Moses and Israel. And Moses takes blood from the sacrifice and he sprinkles it on the people, and he says, this is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you. Can you picture the scene? The whole of Israel standing in front of God, in front of the assembly. They've just heard that God says, I want to enter into a relationship with you. And Moses takes the blood and he sprinkles it over the Israelites. And he says, here is a covenant. Here is a relationship that we're going to have with each other. So when Moses confirms a covenant with Israel, he takes this blood from the bowls, he sprinkles it over people to symbolize their cleansing and their new life with God. Even earlier, during the Passover time, it was the blood of the lamb that placed on the doorpost, that provided ultimate protection of the destroyer. So I wonder if you can see what Revelation might be pointing to over here. Because even as the final judgment, as God's wrath is being poured out on a destructive, rebellious world, they are being poured out from golden bowls that come from the altar. In other words, could it be that God is offering mercy, forgiveness, and Passover protection to anyone who is willing to say yes to him? God is so slow to let anyone go. His ultimate goal is not to destroy. I've been reading some commentaries on the 7 plagues that were taking place and about the wrath of God. And one of our Adventist scholars was saying that there's this challenge between God's justice and God's mercy, that the two of them are standing very much in contrast, not in contrast, but like they balance each other out, because God's wrath says, the world is going to face the consequences of the way that it has been living. There's no way. God withdraws his protection from it. But along with that, God comes and he gives his love and his care and his promise of affection. He still calls to them and he says, come out of her, my people. Even, it's interesting that he's looking at Babylon, he's shouting at Babylon, and what are the words that you hear? My people. Where is God's people? In Babylon. God is crying for them to be able to come out. So in the bowls, you get this tension between the mercy of God and the justice of God. Okay, let's have a quick look. I keep falling behind with my presentation. You see over there the anatomy of the bowls, the blood from the Passover lamb poured out over the empire. And God is slow to let anyone go. Even at this late date, in the final judgments are poured out from the vessels of mercy. So it's interesting that the judgment comes from the vessels of mercy. Could it be that these are calls that say, please, people, you need to focus. The world that you're in isn't working. See if you can find another world that you can in. But sadly, not everyone is willing to be rescued. So chapter 17 and chapter 18 then details the collapse of the system that refuses God's mercy, the system called Babylon. Babylon is depicted as this beautiful woman draped in purple, scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones, holding a golden cup. She looks successful. She looks rich. I remember one of the vivid memories I have was at a camp meeting where a speaker, and I'm feeling embarrassed because I'm trying to remember his name, but Elder Devin Sedgwill knows him very well, Jamaican preacher, an evangelist who used to preach in South Africa. Can you remember his name, Elder Devin? Fitzhenry was preaching. And he actually got a girl from the audience, and he dressed her up in a beautiful dress, and Fitzhenry put big earrings onto her, and he put colorful makeup and stuff on, and he put her, and so he was preaching about Babylon, and he was talking about this woman, and he says, just look at her, and then he came and he pulled the earrings off her ears, and he said, these need to go. And then he took a big face cloth, and he took the makeup that was all over. He says, all of that needs to go. And it was such a powerful picture that he was trying to contrast the two different ways that the God's people work. But just imagine for yourself now, let's let go of that kind of gaudiness, but let's just, if you think of the most attractive, seductive woman or man that you can find that's trying to get you to be there. She looks rich. John looks at the imperial economy of Rome, and he sees that that system, everybody wants to be part of the Roman imperial economy because it gives them money. It's the system where the labor, the grain, the resources of the world are siphoned off to cater for the excessive luxury and conspicuous consumption of a privileged few people. Another Adventist scholar by the name of Ranko Stefanovic, let me read it to you. He says, end-time Babylon is not just one city. It is the worldwide religious political system that seduces nations with spiritual compromise, with economic exploitation. It is an unholy alliance of worship and wealth. And so now Revelation 18 and 17 says, Babylon is falling apart. It's beginning to self-destruct. And look who is weeping. It is not the people of God that's weeping, by the way. It's the kings and it's the merchants who are weeping. Those who live with power. Was it King Charles? I haven't read the article yet. He paid how much tax this year? 12 million pounds of tax. And then I saw there's an article that says what the tax figure doesn't tell us. But I haven't read yet what lies underneath all of that. I can guarantee you it will be King Charles who will be standing over here and say, oh Lord, Babylon has fallen. It will be Elon Musk who will be saying, oh, my life has fallen apart for where we can be. John takes the time actually to look at the cargo. And if you think of this triumphal thing, what do you get? You get merchants weeping. What are they weeping over? Revelation 18, verse 11 to 13. It says, gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple silk. By the way, purple in that time of the Bible was the most expensive kind of silk that you could get because it was made out of a very rare pigment from a shell that you could find in only one place somewhere in the world. And then that shell's pigment would be milled together and diluted and you would make purple. So it becomes very expensive. Wood, ivory, bronze, iron, marble, cinnamon, incense, wine, oil, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, and chariots. But don't stop reading because what you get next, at the very bottom of the list, John writes, who do you have? Bodies and human lives. And so what you see on the picture in front of you is this pyramid, an upside down pyramid. Because at the top of the pyramid, you've got all the wealthy things that everybody wants to have, and then the even more valuable things. But right at the bottom of that pyramid are the lives and human bodies of people who have been exploited and who have been mistreated. And it's fascinating. Again, I want to just show you what the Bible says about this. All the way back in Deuteronomy, I'm going to read to you Deuteronomy 24, verse 14 and 15. What does God say? You shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether one of your brethren or one of the aliens who is in your land within your gates. Each day you shall give him his wages and not let the sun go down on it, for he is poor and he has set his heart on it, lest he cry out against the Lord and it be a sin to you. The Bible is always talking against oppressing people. But and Babylon is exactly the opposite. You think you make lots of money, you think you own a lot of things, but you don't pay people a living wage. Have you seen that happen in the world that we live in, for where people can be? James chapter 5, I'm not going to read it, it's about 10 verses. Should I read it? Rich oppressors will be judged. He says, come now, you're rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. This is James, and I'm not going to keep reading that, but go back and read. The Bible talks so much against these exploitative systems. Okay, so, and what does God say about this? He says, this is my last point, where we are. He says, this is why God's voice rings out with such urgency from heaven. He says in Revelation 18, verse 14, come out of her. Do not participate in her sins, so that you do not share in her plagues. This is, by the way, coming out of her, my people, doesn't mean that we have to leave a city and go and live in the countryside. Okay? I know this is maybe controversial. You might not agree with me on this, because I know some of us make choices to go and live in the countryside. It's a good thing, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But what I wanted to say is I can live in the countryside and I can still have the riches of Babylon trying to seduce me where I can be over there. It might just be a different kind of richness that I might want. I've been looking at it, to be honest. In Shetland, they've learned how to make, what do they call it, these tunnels, a green tunnel, a polytunnel, but it's one that's wind resistant. And then you look at the price of it and it's like £20,000, or I can't remember what it is. I said, I want a polytunnel like that. And the Babylon can catch me even with the good that I want to do. This week, did I tell you I went camping this week because I didn't want to go and stay in a hotel in Perth. And so I said, okay, I'll be against Babylon. I will stay in a tent. But I always wanted to buy myself a sleeping bag to stay in the tent. And when I went to look at the cost of sleeping bags, guess how much they cost? £270 for one sleeping bag, because I'm looking for one that can fit on my bicycle. And suddenly Babylon caught me again, because instead of, I could have gone and stayed in a 5-star hotel for £270. Now I'm spending £270 buying a sleeping bag. I have been saving for it, though, over several months, because I'm hoping I'll be able to stay in it many more days and get my money back. Babylon can catch us. It's a call that has echoed itself through history. Listen to the prophet Jeremiah. So I'm going to read 2 scriptures for you and tell me, listen to this. Jeremiah 51, verse 6. Flee from the midst of Babylon, and everyone save his life. Do not be cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He shall recompense her. This is Jeremiah talking about Babylon having an allure on people in the Old Testament. So Babylon will have an allure on us today. Doesn't matter where we live. But my favorite, have a look at Isaiah 52, verse 11. It says, depart, depart, go from there, touch no unclean thing, go out of the midst of her. And it says, be clean, you who bear the vessels of the Lord. So he talks about the priests, and he says, get out of where? Out of Babylon. But I wanted to read to you just a few verses before that verse, and I wonder if you can hear the tone. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who proclaims glad tidings of good things, who proclaims salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. Have you heard that song before? I should have spoken to our choir to come and sing it to us. How lovely on the mountain are the feet of him. Our God reigns. Your watchmen shall lift their voices. With their voices they shall sing together. For they shall see eye to eye when the Lord brings back Zion. Break forth into joy. Sing together, you waste places of Jerusalem. For the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord has made bare his holy arm in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. And only then, what does he say? Depart, depart, go out from there. Touch no unclean thing. Go out from the midst of her. Be clean, you who bear the vessels of the Lord. And to me, this is so beautiful because throughout Revelation, we get this message that the Lord is there. He's got a strong arm. He's mighty to save. Do not be afraid because he's doing his work. And when we see the outcomes of the plagues that come upon people and nations around us, what should we as Christians be doing? We should rejoice. We should be happy. We should be focusing on God, and we need to let go of Babylon. And so, to me, I got so excited when I saw that. Revelation 18 shatters the spell of Babylon. It shows Babylon's parade ending in smoke, and then it invites us to imagine a different economy shaped by the Lamb's self-giving love. And so I just want to suggest 3 habits. I wonder if I made a slide of it. No, I didn't. Is it there? 3, the Lamb's economy. Let's just quickly, just 3, I thought to myself, how can I make it practical? By the way, the slides, I wrote the sermon and then I stuck the slides into artificial intelligence, Notebook LM. And I said, please make slides for me from what I'm preaching. And it came up with these slides. So credit to where credit is due. But these are just the summary of my sermon in a way. 3 things that I want to suggest. Intentional simplicity. How can we live out of Babylon? Maybe we can be simple. We can live with simplicity. I do not have to drive the smartest car necessarily. Or actually, smart car is still fine. But the thing is, I don't know about you, but I get seduced by Babylon because it's, I think in 2 months, there will be a new version of this implement. I got this one last year. Do you know how I'm feeling tempted to buy the next one that's coming up? This one will serve me for another 5 years. What you should do is you should hold me to it. I should hold on to this one. Ask me in 2 months' time, I can't afford, I bought myself a sleeping bag. I can't afford this to buy a new one. Simplicity. Choose something simple in life. I can be simple with the clothes I wear. I can be simple in the way that I consume media. I don't have to have every social media channel open in front of me. I can be simple, simplistic, and I can read books rather than just listening to audio books and fancy things. I can reduce my life into something small. That's the one. The other one, I don't know who of us are business people here, and maybe we need to hear that. I think to live outside of Babylon means that we deal with other people in a way that is fair and that in a way that is just. So if I owned a business, I don't think we've got anybody here that, I think many of us are the ones who suffer under unjust people who don't pay us as much as we should be paid. But it could be that if I go into a business transaction, you can sometimes buy something from Amazon Marketplace. No, not Amazon, Facebook Marketplace. And they will advertise it for £100. And then you'll say, oh, can I give you £40 for it? And you know that £40 is a real bargain. Would it be fair to offer them maybe £75 or something instead of treat people with fairness? I'm hoping I'm maybe not using a good example with Facebook Marketplace. Although I think it's good to, simplicity sometimes says buy something off Facebook Marketplace rather than buying it from Amazon directly or something, because you get a second-hand one. I think it could be a good. And then the last idea for me for simplicity, for coming out of Babylon, is just Sabbath. I think there is something special about switching off on a Sabbath. And we've spoken about it in this quarter, even not checking our social media as much on Sabbath. Even just finding a way to, I don't know who's playing football tonight, just forget about it. We can wake up tomorrow morning and that match would have happened and the outcome would have, it doesn't matter how much I've cheered, that match would have happened. Just take the time and spend it with God and think of a different way of being other than just to be in the way of the world around us for where we can be. And so my final slide. Come out of her, my people, so that you do not take part in her sins, and so that you do not share in her plagues. It's not a call to pack our bags and move to the desert. It is a demand to evaluate our allegiances and disentangle ourselves from the economic system and the political system that we're in and just living in a very different way. That's the challenge that we have for where we can be. And God says to us, I'm offering you this grace to get out of it. And he says, the system abuses people, but that's imploding. The merchant's parade is ending. Do not go down with a city that treats human lives like merchandise. Come out, wash your robes in the blood of the Lamb, and take your stand with the God who loves you. Amen.